Gaming isn't fun anymore is a sentiment we can see repeated a lot throughout gaming communities nowadays, especially Minecraft, for example. Many seem to think that instead of evolving as a game continuously receiving updates should, Minecraft has strayed too far from its original identity, losing nearly all essence of what made it fun to begin with. People have been picking apart everything they believe shouldn't have changed about the game, from the new cave generation system to the insanely new rare mobs, down to the new songs and artists working on the soundtrack. All this apparently being the fault of lazy, dumb, Zoomer Mojang employees who don't understand what makes the game as good as we do, the other Zoomers who played it since release. I may not know much about Minecraft's current development and all the inner workings of a company like Microsoft, but I think it's fair to say that these gaming discussions tend to lead to some rather bizarre and reductive conclusions. The idea that things were better before and something is wrong now is not a new concept, nor is it revolutionary, and often is easily taken down by the fact that most people parroting these arguments have either outgrown the games they enjoyed when they were 14 and are solely running on nostalgia, or actively refuse to explore different avenues like indie games to truly find something they might enjoy. See, that's easy to say about games like Call of Duty, for example, but what about games that are truly just unique? Team Fortress 2 is one of the greatest online multiplayer video games ever made, and with other games like Overwatch coming so close to becoming the best possible modern take on the gameplay, only to crumble under terrible balancing decisions and the evil lurking within the company that owns it, I feel TF2 will continue to be one of the greatest for decades to come. Of course, over the last 17 years of its lifetime, TF2 has also had its fair share of bad balance changes and company controversies. Some might say it was actually much worse in some ways. I mean, TF2 literally went through a 5-year-long cheater bot infested update drought. It seriously can't get any worse than that, and yet, Team Fortress 2 still pulls great player numbers, especially after a revised summer update and the addition of zombie infection in 2023's Halloween event. So what's the secret? How does a game like TF2 still manage to retain a solid player base over almost 2 decades later? And how will it continue to do so in the future? Well, some would say that it's because TF2 has always stuck to its core gameplay principles and by finally keeping its artistic integrity in order. Okay, well, not exactly. I've been lying to you a little bit. As much as we love to compare the two, Team Fortress is absolutely not comparable to something like Overwatch anymore. While most live service games remain fully in control of their company and developers as updates get put into the game, TF2 has almost always relied on community contributions to fill out its updates. In fact, the first community-made maps to be officially added into the game date back to 2008. If you know anything about Valve's history, this comes as no surprise. Hell, Team Fortress was originally just a Quake mod. At the time, Valve cared more than most video game companies about giving the players the tools to be creative, whether it's through Source Filmmaker for animation, the Hammer Editor for map making, or the addition of the Steam Workshop, which allowed people to submit their very own modeled cosmetic items to be put into the game. This, of course, spawned an insanely lively community. Team Fortress 2 was no longer a game, but instead, a genuine hobby. If you're into TF2, there's a very strong chance that you also create stuff, videos, posters, art, anything, no matter the quality. TF2 makes you more than a regular player, and to some people, this can be a bad thing. So TF2 belongs to the people, that's great, but how can we be sure that the game's audience really knows what's best? This is essentially how this gaming conservatism works for TF2. Although one might say this is not a valid worry to have because every community-made asset that gets into the game has to be reviewed and approved by a Valve employee in charge of keeping these updates on track. So let's take a look at the couple of community additions that go against the game's core gameplay principles and artistic integrity. We'll be focusing on the latter for now since this is one of the most direct ways a player can contribute. Look, we've all seen Funk's death of an art style before, but it's pretty clear that this mindset was mostly based on this video at first. While I personally agree that crates suck, most unusuals are ugly, and items descriptions were cool, like, seriously, what happened to them? I'm not fully on board with everything else in this video. While yes, Team Fortress 2 letting players mix up and paint their cosmetics as they want to can lead to some very distractingly ugly loadouts, that's all they are in the end, ugly loadouts. Most of the art style complaints I see thrown at TF2's recent editions almost always omit the fact that these are simply ugly and insanely expensive loadouts that only an infinitely small fraction of the player base is willing to wear. Sure, clipping is an issue, and I agree that Valve should have been and still should be more careful when implementing these things into the game. But on the other hand, these complaints take it to an unrealistic level by suggesting that a majority of fellow human beings capable of utilizing their brains will look at this and say, I want my set to look like this. I must either get really lucky with opening crates or directly spend an absurd amount of money. Team recognition being another concern that I have seen pop up again within the community a couple months ago is, in my opinion, completely taken out of proportion. It's really not worth taking that seriously. Of course, it would be terrible if items allowed you to paint them in such a way as to fool the enemy team that you are actually on their team. It would completely ruin the point of the game. But as of right now, this is truly only the case for 2 or 3 loadouts, and even then you would really need to make a big reach to make me think otherwise. I mean really, when are you ever going to look at a heavy from this specific angle? The only answer I can think of is if you were a soldier bombing in with the airstrike, where even then it wouldn't really matter if you saw this heavy in the crowd you went to fire at anyways. This fear of team recognition being violated also relies heavily on the assumption that a majority of other players seek out to do this on purpose to get an advantage over you.
Hence, why most people do shit like this. They dye a whole pyro set Mango orange and another color similar to slate, and then wear them on the opposite teams. And man, does this fuck with people.
In fact, no, most players don't spend money on a pair of the same ugly cosmetic set and 6 paint buckets to increase their likelihood to win a game of Bad Water. Most players wear cosmetic sets they've built themselves over time that they think makes them look more unique and not to gain a competitive advantage over you. While yes, you are likely to run into this very pyro one day, and I agree that these cosmetics should receive some kind of fix or restrictions to their paintable regions, that's all there is to it. But why am I still talking about this if these videos just want to get the word out about these problematic loadouts? Where's the part that's really being taken out of proportion here? In this video on the team recognition issue, TF2 YouTuber ZestiJesus repeatedly seems to put the blame for these essentially broken cosmetic sets onto the workshop creators instead of the developers in charge of implementing them into the game properly.
Hopefully this will raise a little red flag to Valve saying, hey guys, maybe you should stop adding items like this, and maybe it'll be a swift kick to the dick for workshoppers. Hey dipshits, maybe you should actually pay attention to the game you're making items for? That'd be a pretty good thing to do, I'd say. TF2's tones and themes and stylistic and design elements, especially those that define and control the gameplay, must not change, especially not on the whims of those who want to make money off the game's cosmetic features. Preserving TF2's visual nature isn't some contrarian act I perform out of spite. I love this game, but I'm tired of seeing it bastardized by people who take no interest in where this game came from.
I can't be the only one who thinks this is weird, right? At some point he even shows how easy it would be to add a blue variant of this war paint, and like, wouldn't you agree that this should have been the job of the TF2 team developer whose job it is to put it into the game to add this? After all, the workshop is just supposed to be a fun place for creative players to submit their fan creations with a small potential of it being added into the game. And anyone is allowed to make a submission, right? Well, some would disagree. In fact, following the years of Valve's absence and responsibilities quietly passing on to the community, many began to see the workshop as the new arbiters of all things TF2. It wasn't a place to share your creations with your fellow TF2 players, no. If you post something on the workshop, you are taking the stance of a professional game designer and you fully believe that your item is to be implemented into the game. This is frankly a terrible way to see the workshop and its hundreds of thousands of creators, since there are so many people submitting their very first hats and the odd unfinished map here and there, and a lot of joke submissions just so that it's handy to download them from the workshop. If Big Valve sees an unfinished submission and decides to put it into the game without giving it the proper fixes it needs beforehand, the fault shouldn't fall on the workshopper.
And this is where I blame both Valve and the map creator. Valve for even thinking that this map could be fixed to their standards in 4 days. This at least gives them the benefit of the doubt, and makes it sound like they were at least aware of the issues. And to the map creator, who thought that this map could be fixed in 4 days, he passes off everything as not having time before release, and how he didn't even have any of the tools or map files ready. And yet he full well knew that this map had never been finished, let alone tested. And yet both parties agreed to this in the end.
Wouldn't it be fair to assume that if a $6 billion gaming company approaches you about a map you abandoned a couple years ago, they would have some sort of plan or something prepared to help you finish it in only 4 days? And that they would tell you whether or not they can help you before you have to lock in those 4 days for sure? Like, wouldn't that be a fair assumption? Because that's not what happened. Though in 2023, Valve graced us with the addition of community-made game modes into the casual rotation. So now I guess we've got another problem on our hands. Around December of last year, a VScript prop hunt game mode was posted on the workshop with a couple of maps. The game mode works the same way as any old version of prop hunt, except that each class has a special ability when playing as the props, and the hunters can work together as a team as you would in regular TF2 to find them. This means that the medic can heal anyone taking damage from hitting the wrong props, and the engineer can place down sentries, for example. Having played the game mode myself personally, I think it is pretty fun, though it could use a lot of reworking and different ideas to make it fit into TF2. So, I agree that it should not be put into the game in its current state. Zesty Jesus, however, goes even further by pointing out a potential conspiracy lying within the game mode.
They didn't care. They rushed out 6 new maps, launching them all within 24 hours of each other, all by mostly the same people. This was done with the obvious intention to flood the workshop with new maps, some of them Christmas and winter themed, so Eric Smith takes notice and throws them in as the new game mode for Smithmas. 4 of the new maps are either reskins or just reworks of existing maps, and only 2 are original. Come on, this is fucked up.
Once again, it would seem that money and attention-hungry workshop mappers are out to get us. Through the sales of map stamps, they wish to collect an ungodly amount of money with which they will make another game that will rival TF2 and kill us all, and we'll all explode, and ooh, scary, be scared, you're scared. They're out to get you. They're in your game. Obviously, I think this is ridiculous for the same reasons as before. While criticizing the game mode is a good thing, this goes a couple steps beyond by assuming the absolute worst in these people. In June of 2023, Zesty released a video responding to Unusual Sandwich's own video, in which he talks about how player-made decals can sometimes be a problem in TF2, and generally calls for the addition of a toggle option that would turn them on and off. I personally think the video does indeed take the problem a bit out of proportion, but it's overall still a very valid worry to have, and would be a great quality of life feature to have in the game. Zesty, however, fears for the worst, believing that the popularity of such a video could lead to Valve unleashing all of their power to either monitor every single decal, leading to a 1984 type society where all of your decals are censored forever by Big Valve, or that all decals be deleted forever.
It's belligerent fallacy, spun to bring yourself up and put anyone else who disagrees with you down, while ignoring the aforementioned problems increased moderation brings, especially from Valve, and ignoring the risk of this video leading to the obliteration of decals thanks to Valve often flipping the fucking kill switch.
He also states that apparently Valve takes direct action when it comes to illegal decals, which I have honestly never heard of before, but I could be wrong.
Think of it this way. Isn't it a bit stupid to go around a public space showing you have illegal material like this? Talk about a quick way to get locked up. Valve has your bank information, your location, and would undoubtedly hand that over to the authorities immediately upon being reported. This further shows just how grossly exaggerated these arguments are.
Despite Valve apparently being so powerful and willing to listen to someone like Unusual Sandwich, Zesty's argument seems to be completely against any and all changes being proposed publicly like this. Instead, he is more advocating for nothing to be changed, since players have been dealing with these issues just fine so far.
This sudden uproar about decals effectively boils down to one's own personal sensitivities being infringed upon, with not safe for work and/or offensive content. To which all I can say is, sorry, you're shit out of luck. TF2's always been this way. Why are we suddenly complaining about it now? Given the nature of open and free expression, yeah, you're gonna come across something personally offensive or not safe for work, but as before, these don't make up a majority of player interactions, and it's deceitful to say they're causing widespread rampant problems when they never have before. And who cares if you see something offensive or not safe for work in TF2? The game is a mature, largely unmoderated space with features that allow for players to post and say whatever the fuck they want, so long as it's legal, features that have been present for most of the game's lifespan, with little to no issues.
Well, clearly not, because people are complaining about this right now, but, it's the whole reason why this thing started, but whatever. If anything, I think this video showcases a deep-rooted fear in this corner of the TF2 community. In regards to TF2, Valve is an uncaring god.
Keep pushing for better, guys, but Valve clearly does not care for this game as much as they once did, and they never will again.
There is this fear that has been stewing in TF2 for a long time regarding Valve's choices and abilities. Back in 2020, during the bot crisis, Valve made the decision to restrict free-to-play players' access to communication in-game. This means that if you didn't pay for a TF2 item yet, you wouldn't be able to type messages or use voice chat anymore. As the change sorta came out of nowhere, most of us assumed that this would be a temporary solution while Valve worked on a better way to restrict or completely remove cheater bots from the game. But this follow-up would never come, at least not until the middle of 2024 following the Fix TF2 movement. Nearly 4 years of radio silence on the issue other than a tweet, for the bot crisis to receive some kind of patch. And F2Ps are still completely muted. Meet Your Match is one of the most hated updates TF2 has ever received. Releasing in 2016, it was first believed Valve's intention would be to give competitive players officially tailored 6v6 competitive matchmaking, with a couple of balance changes on the side. What really happened on the release, however, is that we got a slow, broken, and yet to be fixed competitive sixes matchmaking full of restrictions that don't even make it worth playing, and an entire casual matchmaking system and questionable weapon changes that nobody asked for. To this day, there is a consensus that this update was the result of Valve taking advice from competitive players and even YouTubers.
Competitively oriented players are indeed the loudest vocal minority of the TF2 player base. They have driven a lot of change over the past few major updates, and they hold a lot of influence. But when Valve listened to their input on balance changes, what did we get? We got items that were nerfed into the floor that were perfectly fine and wacky and casual, but not competitively viable because it didn't fit into a predictable, repetitive, and boring meta. We received a barely functioning matchmaking system that killed community servers. They got their 6v6 mode too. And when these competitive players got the changes they wanted, like in the Meet Your Match or Jungle Inferno updates, what did they do? They just fucking ignored them and went back to what they've been doing for the past decade. They went back to their own servers with their own rules and their own whitelists, and the majority of players that enjoy the game casually were left to pick up the fucking pieces.
When this couldn't be any further from the truth. Meet Your Match was entirely Valve's own doing, and a clear attempt to match the systems of its competitors at the time. Though instead of continuing to fix the game, they seemingly gave up when player numbers didn't match their expectations. I won't go more in depth into this casual versus competitive arc of TF2's history. It's really just more of the same thing. There are many more examples of this behavior in Valve's handling of Team Fortress 2, and the ways in which the community members have managed to misconstrue the real source of the problem over the years. If Valve only applies direct, potentially game-ruining solutions when taking advice from the community, then it's better to keep our heads down and bear with all that's broken, and to shut down anyone going too far and risking seriously getting Valve's attention. You've just gotta gatekeep what you love.
This would require some alternate universe in which Valve actually moderates their games, but they don't beyond dropping the nuke.
If you agreed with that last sentence, congratulations, you've fallen for the fear-mongering that TF2 conservatives have been pushing for over the last couple years. The way it works is actually pretty simple when you see it. Creators like Zesty seem to unconsciously formulate their videos in this three-step plan. First, you state something generally agreeable, even if it doesn't fully represent the opposition's argument. Prop hunt doesn't fit TF2, let's not remove decals, these cosmetics are practically broken. Second of all, you blow it out of proportion. Prop hunt is a cash grab. Removing decals is a slippery slope to censorship. All players will trick you and the game will die. And third of all, you shift the blame, or create an enemy. Money-hungry map makers, new generation players, lazy workshoppers. And all this often leads to an implicit call to action to take matters into your own hands.
Gatekeep your communities, people. Gatekeep them and preserve them for what they are before people like this worm their way in and make it rot from the inside out. The degradation of TF2's visuals is the direct result of Valve's gradually increasing neglect, which leaves the front door wide open. Item creators' lack of care doesn't help either, because they're never held to higher standards. By anybody. No knocks, no locks. And I've said all this before. Somebody's gotta put their foot down. That's why I keep stepping in and stating the obvious. Things that people don't want to fucking say for fear of not being heckin' wholesome 420 chungus all the time.
This, I believe, also caused a rapid growth in reactionaries, with many creators strongly opposing the simplest of concepts. Oh, you wish you had a quality of life feature added into the game? Too bad, we've been dealing with slurs and not safe for work images on our screen just fine for the last 17 years. Plus, you've got less playtime than I do.
The gall you must have to walk into TF2 when you started playing in 2017 and demand that things should change to protect your own personal sensitivities, labeling decals as the game's biggest mistake when you never experienced TF2 in its heyday, or any of its other shortcomings aside from bots, is fucking laughable.
Want to peacefully protest and encourage people to boycott the game for Valve to properly take care of it again? Should have invited my friends and I to your private Discord server, now it's ruined.
And oh yeah, there are more YouTubers, and let's not invite these two or three who pointed out the flaws with the first movement in the first place.
Want to playtest some silly weapon changes on your own server for fun? You're like communism.
This guy is literally just communism. He presents like a surface level but pretty accurate detail of the problem, and then the worst possible solution to it that just makes it worse.
I don't think that Great Blue knows what communism is, but he does make a fairly good point, because if Grouch represents communism, then I guess he represents capitalism, the way he essentially stole his video to make a 2-hour-long reaction stream that is fully monetized and has 3 times the amount of views. That's a pretty hefty paycheck for sitting down for 2 hours and essentially not really doing anything other than mocking somebody. Well done. It's no secret that workshoppers have been facing harassment for items that don't fit this narrative, and it's also no secret that the TF2 workshop has a history of toxicity happening between the creators themselves. But ultimately, going after these creatives does nothing to fix the issue, especially when you stand at a high place in the community and avoid responsibility for this as an inability to control your audience. If there is a loophole and you see bad actors partaking in it, the solution isn't just to remove them, because the loophole will still remain for new bad actors to partake in it in more discreet ways. What you need is a systemic change for the loophole itself to be dealt with, however scary this might seem. When you bring fear and hatred into the whole community, all that results in is a toxic environment that only discourages new blood from contributing to the game's ecosystem, which ironically highly benefits these bad actors currently. So, where do we go from here? After the recent ban waves and the changes to the map distribution and the quality of this year's summer update, I am personally very hopeful that fixed TF2's impact will lead us to a much healthier Team Fortress 2 in the long run. Of course, this isn't enough to dissuade reactionaries just yet, but it's clear that their arguments weaken as the game receives the Valve-certified slightly above bare minimum amount of care again.
Ah, yay, there we go. There's our pop culture reference. Yeah, MF Doom is now in TF2. Listen, in my opinion, we don't need modern pop culture references put inside of Team Fortress 2. TF2 is a heavily stylized game that takes place during a specific time period in America or in the world, I suppose.
What the fuck are you talking about? There's a fucking Mario hat in the game. Team Fortress 2 didn't survive for 17 years because its art style was kept in pristine condition or because it didn't let in dumb mini-games from time to time. TF2 survived because Valve made a nearly perfect game and blessed its players with the creative tools to keep it alive forever. At least it feels like it sometimes. And sometimes that just means adapting to the times a little. TF2 conservatives like to claim that the game was better before all the updates, that it should return to the late 2000s when in reality, most of them only truly started playing after Jungle Inferno. And hey, there's nothing wrong with being a recent player, or to wish for a previous version of the game, but to use that to fearmonger each other into believing the game's slow evolution is a danger to its longevity, to attack one of its strongest pillars, being the creative community, is plain dumb. We do tend to forget that TF2 is a live service game. A couple years ago there would be this silent contract made between you, the player, and the game's developers, stating that the product you've obtained is to stay the same way or at the very least receive updates that align with its core principal elements, and patch out bugs and other issues. But the Overwatch 2 fiasco showed everyone the dark reality that we simply don't really own our games anymore. Ultimately, the fear that your favorite live service game will completely change from one day to another is a valid one. Hell, every Fortnite chapter might as well be a different game altogether. But TF2 is one that's not gonna change. Even if in 20 years Valve turns completely evil and turns it into Ricochet 2, somebody will have made a source mod ready to restore the whole game. Let's allow the next generation of players to help influence TF2's future. We are going to be okay.